James walked away from a wealthy life to plow dry, cracked soil under a burning sunrise. And that morning, his mother fell to her knees in the cornfield crying, "Son, please, come home before I lose you forever." But the answer James gave her shattered every hope she had left. At dawn, when the cornfield glowed gold under the first touch of sunlight, a mother ran toward her son, begging him to stop suffering. But James, once the pride of a wealthy family, now stood barefoot in a dry field, clinging to a life of hardship he chose for himself. Why? Because going home meant facing a father who refused to accept the woman he loved. And staying here meant breaking his mother's heart a little more each day. Today's story takes us into a storm of family conflict, hidden schemes, and painful sacrifices. From a mother's desperate pleas, to James's unshakable resolve, to a dark room where someone plots to tear him and Diep apart forever. As emotions collide, as hope flickers against regret, one question rises. How far will James go to protect the people he loves? And will his family break apart before they ever find their way back together? If this journey touches you, please consider subscribing our small channel. Your support truly means the world to us. Dawn slowly crept across the cornfield, the pale gold light spilling over rows of dry stalks as James pushed the heavy plow through the soil. The morning air was cool, quiet, until he heard footsteps rushing toward him. His mother came running, breath shaking, eyes already brimming with tears. "James, what are you doing? Why are you suffering like this?" she cried, grabbing his arm as if she could pull him out of the field by force. "Come home with Mom. Don't stay here anymore. It's too hard, my son. It breaks my heart." She begged him to sit down, to take a break, to at least look at her. Watching him struggle like this, calloused hands, sunburned skin, clothes worn from labor, was unbearable for her. She wiped her tears, but they kept falling. "James, answer me, please." But James just shook his head gently. His voice was calm, steady in a way that made her even more emotional. "Mom, it's okay. I'm getting used to this. Working out here, it's actually good for me." To him, this simple labor brought a strange sense of peace. The physical effort grounded him, made him feel alive in a way his old life never had. But his mother couldn't accept that. She leaned closer, her voice trembling. "You don't need to be here. There are so many other jobs you could do. And what about Diep? You have to go back and take care of her." James stayed firm. "I told you already. I'm determined to find the proof I need." Her heart clenched. No matter how she reasoned with him, he wouldn't budge. And the more she pleaded, the heavier his resolve seemed. She kept trying. Her voice soft at times, desperate at others, because she was terrified he'd stay like this forever, working himself into the ground. "Let me handle things for you. Let me talk to your father. You don't have to bury yourself in this place," she said, through trembling breaths. But James only shook his head again. "Mom, living here is good for me. I can take care of myself. Doing manual work isn't something to be ashamed of. Farmers live like this every day. And honestly, I'm starting to like it." Her emotions twisted inward. Regret, fear, love, all tangled together. She wished with everything in her that he would change his mind. Yet James stood in the middle of that wide sunlit field, scratched hands and tired feet, like a symbol of quiet resilience against everything he used to be. A breeze swept across the corn, carrying the smell of damp earth and morning dew. It brushed gently against them, peaceful, almost serene. And somehow, that made the pain sharper. She wrapped her arms around him, crying into his shoulder. She didn't know if her son would soften, or if he would stay rooted in this new life he had chosen. The scenery looked calm, but the emotion between them was anything but. Hope flickered in her chest, small but persistent, as the morning light cast long, warm stripes across their opposing stances. Her desire to bring him home versus his determination to stay. She continued, voice cracking. James, please, don't make Mom worry like this anymore. Just come home, talk to your father. If you keep living like this, how can I ever be at ease? But James refused softly. Mom, I don't want you to take my place or work instead of me. I feel free here. I'm happy living like this. She looked at him, devastated. Do you not love Mom anymore? Her question hit him deeply. James swallowed hard. I do love you. I love you, Mom. And I love Diep. And little Nee, too. Hearing that, her tears returned full force. Nee misses you so much. She talks about you every day. Come home, eat something, then go back with Mom. I cooked rice for you. But James stepped back slightly, shaking his head more firmly. No, Mom. I'm not going home, not now. To him, this wasn't about stubbornness. It was the only way he could protect those he loved. If I go back right now, Dad will forbid me again. And if I bring Diep and Nee back with me, he might make things even harder for them. I need Dad to take responsibility for what he's done. Then I can come home with peace in my heart. The conflict inside him deepened. He wanted happiness, wanted his family back. But the reality standing in front of him was too heavy to ignore. His mother listened silently, her eyes swollen and red. The wind blew through the field again, carrying with it a strange sadness, like memories rustling through time. She kept pleading, hoping, wishing, praying that he would change his mind. But James didn't move. He stared into the distance, breath slow, mind full of contradictions he couldn't yet resolve. Still, after a long, quiet moment, something in him cracked open. Mom, I want a happy family too, he whispered. I want to live in our old house again. I miss Dad. I miss you. I miss the days when we were all together. I was so happy back then. His voice wavered, showing the longing he had kept hidden for so long. But right now, Mom, please, just go home. Give me 1 or 2 more days to think clearly. She nodded slowly, though her heart ached. He gently asked her to keep his situation a secret from Dad for now. She promised she would carry his message, tell him everything from abroad, and check on Diep and Nee as well. James reminded her to eat, drink water, buy fruit, and take care of herself, and she told him to stay strong. They parted in the middle of the dry cornfield, each step she took feeling heavier than the last. As she walked away, the twilight breeze brushed against her back, carrying regret, longing, and a quiet, painful hope that maybe, just maybe, the family could still be whole again someday. The sun dipped lower, casting a pale orange glow across the fields as James watched his mother disappear down the dirt path. When she finally faded from view, the world fell silent again, just the rustle of dry corn and the soft hum of the wind. He stood there for a long moment, letting the weight of everything settle on his heart. But far away, In a dimly lit room, another conversation was already unfolding. A man sat in front of the desk, shadows stretching across his face. The flickering bulb above cast uneven light over the room, making the space feel like a place where secrets clung to the walls. A knock came at the door. "Sir," a voice whispered, "I've finished the task you assigned me." The man lifted his head. "How is the situation?" The reporter stepped closer. Diep said she would give up on James. The man's eyes widened, clearly taken aback. "Are you sure? Diep? That girl? She's never backed down before." "Yes," the reporter replied. "She said it herself. I think she's too tired. She's been holding on alone for so long. And since you didn't resolve things, she finally told me she'd give up." A slow smile formed on the man's lips. He leaned back in his chair, confidence returning. "You're very good at what you do." The reporter chuckled lightly. "Nothing is difficult for me, sir, as long as the payment is right." "But," the man pressed, his tone suddenly sharp, "if James returns to Vietnam and Diep doesn't keep her promise, then what?" "Don't worry," the reporter assured him. "Diep is a woman of her word. She won't break a promise, especially one she made in such a desperate moment." The man nodded, satisfied. "Good. You did well. But remember, you must keep this a secret." "No worries, sir. Only you and I know this." A low laugh escaped the man. "If Diep keeps her promise, I'll give you the wood workshop. It'll be yours." The reporter's eyes gleamed. Personal gain was all he cared about. The dim room echoed with the sound of two men bound by hidden motives, their laughter clashing starkly with the faint daylight peeking through the window. A world of conspiracy divided from the innocence of the fields outside. Shadows flickered along the wall, stretching like long fingers of secrecy, deepening the tension that pulsed between them. There was no regret here, only schemes, only the hope of a reward. Meanwhile, back in the countryside, the atmosphere was entirely different. The afternoon sun burned red, touching everything with a warm glow. The labor was simple, almost meditative, but today, something cracked open inside Mrs. Hoyen. She set the basket down, her breath hitched. "I think it's time to change my plan," she admitted quietly. The person beside her paused. "Change your plan? About what?" She hesitated, gripping the edge of the basket. Finally, she spoke, voice trembling but resolute. "Please, help me go with Mr. Tran on the business trip." "What? With James's dad?" "Yes," she said with a firm nod. "He's going to Haiduang soon, and I think he'll be happy if I accompany him. Maybe, just maybe, this trip will help things soften, help things change. For James." Her voice cracked at his name. The psychological pressure she'd been carrying for weeks suddenly burst to the surface. All the longing, the regret, the fear that her family was falling apart. It pushed her toward a decision she hadn't dared to make until now. She wiped her sweat-streaked forehead, but her hands still shook. "I don't want the family to continue like this. I want to help James's father see, to understand, so we can all be together again." The field around them felt suddenly alive. The damp soil beneath her fingers symbolized new growth, new hope, opposing the dry, brittle uncertainty that had consumed their lives. She didn't know if this plan would work, but she had to try. Because doing nothing only let the distance grow wider. The sky deepened into a fiery red, shadows lengthening across the rows of soil. resembling long trails of waiting and unresolved longing. The wind carried the smell of dust and future rain. Her heart beat hard with anxiety and determination. The person beside her whispered, "Do you think this will help Mr. Tran and James reconcile?" Her voice thinned with emotion. I hope so. James is suffering. His father is stubborn, and I'm caught in the middle. But if I don't try, how can anything change?" For a moment, everything stilled. The field, the wind, even the trembling in her chest. She could almost see the future she wanted. James returning home, Diep and Nee reunited with him, a family sitting together again like they used to. But reality stood tall, like a wall between them. She picked up the basket again, but her hands faltered. The soil spilled through her fingers, slipping away like time. "I just want my son back," she whispered. The emotional weight of her words hung heavy in the air. The sun lowered further, painting the world in shades of orange and gold. She looked toward the distant road, the same path James's mother had walked earlier, and silently prayed that the choices they made today would lead to something better. A turning point, a chance for reconciliation, a chance for James to finally come home. And somewhere between sweat and soil, fear and hope, the atmosphere pulsed with tension, caught between the harshness of reality and the possibility of forgiveness. At sunrise, James works alone in a dry cornfield, choosing hardship over returning home. His mother arrives in tears, begging him to stop suffering and come back to the family, and to Diep and little Nee, who miss him deeply. But James refuses, knowing that returning would only lead to more conflict with his father, who still opposes his relationship. He longs for the old days when their family was whole, yet he believes he must stay away until the truth is revealed and his father takes responsibility. Meanwhile, in a dark room, a man secretly plots to separate James and Diep, convinced she has finally given up. And far away, James's mother decides to join a business trip, hoping it will create a chance for reconciliation. The story unfolds through pain, determination, and the fragile hope of reunion.